Hello everyone, my name is Drew Sukup. On behalf of VMUG, I'd like to welcome you to today's Zadara Webcast. Zadara, Bulletproof Backups, presented by Doug Jury, Vice President of Partner Marketing at Zadara, and Howard Young, Director of Solutions Architecture at Zadara. Thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your continued support in the Global VMUG program. Before we begin, I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webcast will be recorded and available for you on demand. You will receive an email with the on-demand link, so keep an eye out for that. Second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation. All questions will need to be entered into the question window near the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. Third, there will be a short online evaluation that pops up as you exit the webcast. Please take a minute and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. All attendees from today's webcast who opted in their information at registration will be entered into a raffle to win a $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be contacted directly by Zadara, so good luck. All right, let's get started. From sunny Florida, we've got Doug. I'll turn it over to you now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Drew. Appreciate it. I love the I love the way we start these VMUGs. By the way, you're always so hospitable with the whole team, and also you folks out there dialing in and listening to this webinar today. I think we have 4 time zones across the country, of course, as you'd imagine. So good morning, good afternoon, and I'm also going to say good evening for you folks coming in from Europe. I know that we have some folks doing that. So anyway, what I'm going to do is really try to make this. I don't want to say bulletproof backup is doesn't just fly off the page. It really should for you folks that are really struggling with some of the things that we have to do today. But I really want to make this interesting and also interactive. I've got some. I'll be going ahead and watching for questions. I've got some polling questions and so forth. So just sit tight. You'll get this materials, as Drew said, and the recording. So you don't have to take a whole lot of notes. Just kick back, have a cup of coffee and listen up. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, of course, bulletproof backup and ransomware, introduce Zadara a bit, and why the architecture from Zadara is so important to really put together the architecture, put together this, what we call 32110, the zip code from Veeam, and that'll kind of fly off the page for you a little bit and give you some really interest in that whole piece. We've got some examples and some use cases that Howard will take us through, and then we're going to go ahead and get started and a call to action to be able to do some of that. And like I said, Q&A all through the session, and we'll be able to handle that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Howard to go through some of the business pieces of this. So Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. One of the things that sort of has caught my eye is that there are a lot of instances in companies that don't even really care about their data. They're looking at it. It's not really important. It's significant less important, or somewhat less important. But the big thing is that with COVID and any type of work from home and work, remote office work, this data is becoming a lot more important now. So 75% of companies that were polled back in 2018, that was they said they're seeing their data more and more or increasingly important for their organization. And you can see that in the next couple of slides where backup has become a very important aspect of backing up and recovering your data. One of the big things that we're seeing now in the industry is that that a lot of ransomware is being applied on systems, and that's causing a lot of downtime. So you see a lot of data breaches, and a poll here from IDC is that 60% companies have been actually breached in one way or another. And if you're one of those companies that have been breached and have been attacked and actually had to pay a ransom, it's quite possible that there's a 94% chance that you may have to go out of business. So this is very costly, and you may not survive that. Another thing is that with the technology that's been going on for the last, I would say 30, 40 years, is that your backup data may not be as safe as you think it is. So if you're doing backup tapes or backing up your data to tapes, it's quite possible that you will not be able to recover your data. So this is part of the 3-2-1-1, and the 0 part is the verification of that. So we can actually verify that your backup is actually valid at that point. Now, if you look at the growth of backup and recovery, you can see it's since 2018, it's really gone from about 10 billion and now it's growing up to 15 billion. So 50% increase, and that's just a straight line interpolation of the data. This is really going to be a curve as more and more data is being accumulated through videos and every other types of VDI archives and things like that. Now, if you don't think it costs a lot of money, the other day Google was down for 5 minutes. I couldn't get my email, for example. That usually costs about $5,600 on average when you're down a minute. So think of it as you're actually attacked with ransomware. It can cost a lot of money. So, for example, Norsk Hydro, they actually cost $61 million in downtime. It took months and months to recover that data. So with that in mind, we do have a process that can actually get you up and running a lot quicker. So we can actually get you a DR type of capability or recover from from backup. So it's very quick to do this and actually not worry too much about the ransomware. And Travelex is another example of they were down for weeks in the travel industry. Is unfortunately right now it's down. The amount of business is way down, but being down for weeks is very costly for a company, and they end up paying 2.3 million in fees, or it's probably bitcoins. But you see this more and more. It's very widely spread across cities and other organizations that don't have a protected service like we can provide in Zadara.
So Howard, let me take it back for a moment and talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do. And it's really interesting when you're doing your job here, when you're locked down in your homes and so forth. Education becomes even more difficult. And so I just was alerted by my my operations manager that we had a phishing exercise or somebody tried to do some phishing within Zadara. And I just got the email today. And it said that, click on this if you're running out of capacity and so on. And it seemed pretty innocuous. It seemed pretty interesting. But of course, we're all been trained and educated on not to look at any of these. In fact, my whole family, my wife and my in-laws and everybody were just so careful about these phishing exercises. It all comes down to education. Limiting access is kind of a little bit of a double edge here. If you lock down things too tight, people tend to work around the system. So if you make the passwords, 128 characters, people are going to put in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they're going to make it easy. So you need to have this balance between limiting access and making things reasonable for people's lives. And then you need to, I always use the term, data that's inspected is respected. We want to go back and follow back around to make sure that the process is working well. The different layers, the gateway and endpoint protection, basically working all in concert, and a lot of you folks know this. Patching, I don't know how many people on the bottom of their screen has a patch that maybe is outstanding that they need to basically take care of. And these are all kind of loopholes that we can get in there. And then what we're going to talk about today is backup. And backup is really the piece that sort of does it. And if we separate these items into front end and back end, or human and then the infrastructure, we see that 1, 2, 3 is kind of human elements and things like that, and 4, 5, 6 is more of the back end pieces. So with that, Drew, I'm going to turn it over. Would you go ahead and post the first polling question, please? Okay, perfect. It says, where are you deploying your VMware resources today? So we have AWS and kind of the hyperclouds. We have some other clouds out there, perhaps, that I'm not stating here. Is it on-prem still today? Is it a co-location facility? Or have you basically chosen to work with a managed service provider? So we'll go ahead and leave this open for just a few minutes or a few seconds, and we'll go ahead and let these answers trickle in. So we have a lot of attendees out there. I expect that the results here is going to be quite telling for a lot of folks. So we'll listen to the Jeopardy music for a moment. And I think that's everybody probably found their keyboards and they probably did some clicking. So Drew, go ahead and go ahead and post that result if you'd like to. Okay, perfect. So let's see. On-prem, 76% of people are still doing their VMware on-prem. Let's see, second it would be between a managed service provider and also AWS. And then we have about 5% of the people that are in clouds, and then some co-location facilities. Co-location seems a little low to me. That's interesting that I wouldn't have seen that. So, so anyway, very good. You can go ahead and take that down now, Drew, if you like. And let's go ahead and continue on here. So Zadara is really the fundamental building blocks. It's going to put this, what we've already kind of trickled out the concept of 32110, and we're going to continue to talk to that. But Zadara is sort of the architecture that's going to support that. Every good company, every successful company is going to have some tremendous logos out there. And one of the things that I like about this slide a lot is it's not a particular vertical industry. It's not a particular cloud. Some of it's on-prem. In fact, a fair amount of these are on-prem, but we've solved real business problems, not only as a production environment, but also as a backup in an HR, DR, and HA, and all those other pieces like that. If you were a contractor and you were working out on a site, you might be using the data on Zadara from a company called eBuilder. Or if you're a truck driver and you're driving down the road and you want to drive through the way stations without stopping, you might be using an OmniTrax GPS system and record locking, and that's all done in the cloud today. You know, wow, that's amazing. Maybe you're an Ancestry customer, and you're basically looking at your the pictures and the marriage licenses and things like that from Ancestry. Well, all that data gets ingested in through scanners and so forth, and it all gets presented out in the cloud. So what I love is that these are, if you're a Great Wolf, if you wanted to go water sliding, you know, and you wanted to go to a resort when this all opens back up again, you'd be using a registration system that would basically be on Zadara storage. So anyway, interesting, you know, trusted companies that have kind of done what you've been doing or you've been thinking about doing. We have about 300 clouds installed across 6 continents. So what's interesting here is that we are now reaching out what we call the edge. So we're reaching out to the edge to get the data closer to your point of need. So after this session's over, I would love the folks that are in different geographies and say, hey, how can I do a backup copy to a site that's close to me but outside the general area of interest when it comes to DR or backup? I don't want to have all my data, say, in LA, because if something happens to LA, I'm still in trouble. But I may want to go LA to Las Vegas, or I may want to go from Albuquerque, New Mexico up to Denver, perhaps, or something like that. So all these 300 clouds that are out there today all have a mix of Zadara technology and Veeam technology and all the abilities to do backup and so forth. So again, expanding this to hopefully when I share this session with you in perhaps a year, we might not be able to see the gray here. We might have 1,000 pins in this particular map, and that's really where we're headed, and we're poised to do that kind of work. So let's go ahead and introduce my conversations 9 years ago. So let's go back in time and let's talk about the genesis of Zadara. And I think if you haven't been following Zadara or storage in general, some of this will be news to you. I think some interesting pieces here. So let's go ahead. Enterprise grade performance and security. Okay, everybody thinks they know what that is. It basically is going to be storage that you've been purchasing through perhaps EMC or Dell, maybe through Hewlett-Packard or IBM or Hitachi or a lot of the different companies out there. So Zadara being, you know, we're a collection of executives that have done a couple of different companies prior. So we know enterprise grade storage really well. We know how to get performance. We know how to squeeze out performance at a good price performance for everybody out there. It's a software-defined storage stack. I've got another session that we could spin up at another time that talks specifically about the sort of Zadara and the architecture there. But today we're going to kind of focus on what's behind the scenes for the backup pieces here. So we put this enterprise-grade product together using dedicated SSD drives. Howard will talk about the performance tier. We have hard drives for kind of the capacity tier or object storage. We can do in-flight and at-rest encryption, which is a valuable part when we're talking about ransomware. And then we're going to do all the things that it takes to really make backups and things like that work. So we have to kind of check the box there. 9 years ago, we said, we're going to make the best enterprise-grade performance storage that we can. The real sticky wicket, the real hard part is how do you make this agile, almost infinite, and only pay for what you consume? And I'm going to talk about that in the next couple of slides. But basically, if you spin up, let's say, a performance tier and you use it for 6 or 7 months and you grow, I can add to it and you can pay more. If you go backwards, most of the storage as a service companies out there, you can't go backwards. It's like a ratchet that only goes one direction. Everybody's tried to basically move their ratchet the opposite direction, and you can't do that. So basically, we want to be able to scale up, scale down, pay for what you use. And also, if you're on-prem, 70+%, 76% of you folks said you're on-prem. That's really interesting, because if I take this architecture and put it in your data center, I'm going to basically take care of the hardware upgrades. I'm going to go from an 8 terabyte SSD drive to something larger down the road. I'm going to move from a 14 terabyte hard drive to something larger down the road, and you're not going to pay a nickel for that. So I want to have this agile, infinite storage, pay for what you use, up, down, doesn't matter, fully elastic. And then I have to, sitting at the table 9 years ago, we said, what's the third leg of the stool? And that's, if we're not going to visit these 300 sites, and we're going to do all this from remote, and we're going to be in lots of customers' data centers, we have to build a world-class expert management system and organization. So we have to be able to do 24/7, 365 proactive support. We have to do these migrations from the 14 terabyte drives to something bigger. We need to do upgrades from firmware level X to firmware level Y. And we have to do all this without ever visiting your site, and basically taking this off of your shoulders. So if I take these 3 devices, or these 3 pillars, I end up with this trifecta of the best in class storage, pay for only what you use, up and down, any kind of devices, and forget about the migration, and then have somebody watching your back all the time, seeing what we're going to do here. So we call it zStorage. We also, zStorage is an umbrella for the product called Virtual Private Storage Array. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see it's hard drives and hybrids and SSDs. You can basically build, you probably didn't know this, but you can actually take a hard drive that spins, but put a caching layer in front of it and make it go faster. And now you can get the price point of spinning drives with a caching layer up front. And you have free will. You can do that as often or as big or as small as you want. Now, off to the right, another big idea that we had 9 years ago was to be able to put in the same array block, file, and object. So you don't have to learn 3 different skills. You don't have to basically have 3 different trainings. You don't have to be trained on perhaps HP and EMC at the same time. We're going to do best in breed block, and you get to tune it with the media types. You get to put in file, and you can do that for maybe your middle range backup architecture. And then you can do object with immutability as well, and be able to do that kind of stuff. And then in the middle, underneath the Zadara logo here, you can see the Virtual Private Storage Array, which is now available in colos, data centers, and in the cloud. Now you kind of see why I asked the question of where you're deployed. So available in colos, you had a small 3% of the people said colos. Data centers, that's 76%. And then in the cloud, if we add up all the clouds, we're probably the balance of the data there. So we can pretty much hit all the different use cases that you're looking at very, very easily. Now, I don't like to spend a whole lot of time. I want to get into the backup pieces here, which is why you came. But basically, we can do block, file, and object like we talked about. We can do the all flash. We have deduplication. These are all kind of table stakes for the enterprise storage today. If you can't check these boxes, then you're not really enterprise storage. And this is just a piece that we had to design into our product. Thin provision volumes, large volumes. The NFS, CIFS, iSCSI, ISER, block, file, object, all that kind of stuff, that is more than table stakes. That is something that most of the manufacturers out there are not doing, or maybe aren't doing particularly well. The ability to do non-disruptive upgrades, the mirroring, the clustering, and then of course the at rest and in flight is one of the big things that we want to be able to do. So somebody just asked a question, and it said, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time on it. It says, when you said on the overview side that you can scale up or down as you go, would you please explain that a little bit more for me? And I'd be happy to do that. With our latest release, let's say that you've consumed 10 drives of my architecture, and you say, I need to add another 2 drives or 4 drives or 6 drives, you literally just click on the 2, 4, or 6 drives, and automatically we will grow your volumes and your pools to accommodate that new 6 drives. But now you might say, you know, I kind of went over. I only need 4 drives, and those other 2 drives are costing me some money. So all I do then is I click on those 2 drives and I remove them, and then my volume automatically shrinks back down to perhaps 14 drives or whatever. And this is just something that we can help you with through our professional services, or you can also have free will to do any of this if you wish. And the billing stops as soon as the drives are released. We monitor and we track billing basically every hour. So we basically carve the month up into hourly increments, and whatever you did within that hour is what we basically take a look at. Now, our object storage is going to be huge for our immutability, our record locking, if you will. And so this is going to be a big part of it, what we call down in the lower right, object lock in compliance mode. That gives us that immutability. If you see that lock in this presentation, that really is what that's going to mean for you. Also, erasure coding, which gives you great economy of scale, 2- and 3-way redundancy, all the various things here. And you'll get this slide. You can basically spend some time on this. So let's create a VPSA. Let's have some fun here today. And I'm gonna basically tell you a little story in just a minute that I think you'll enjoy. Maybe I'll put a smile on your face on a Thursday afternoon. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna, 3 simple steps. You're gonna pick your location, whether it be in a colo, in a public cloud, in your data center. You're gonna basically pick where you want the storage to be. Because remember, I am not gonna visit these 300 sites to give you storage. This is all going to be done through today's world, which is all through the web, through URLs, through HTTP, through all those kind of things. That's the way you're going to pick your location and configure your storage. So you're going to be able to do that. And then you're also going to have advanced features and so forth. So what we're doing now is we're going to go ahead and choose your location. In this case, I'm using an AWS example. And the AWS example is I'm going to click on AWS and I'm going to pick on one of the sites that I happen to be, and I'll just use that. As I go over to item number 2, I'm going to now assemble my VPSA, and I'm going to explain what an engine and the drives are in a moment, but it just suffice to say, I'm going to select a 400 engine, and I'm going to select 4 SSD drives. I'm going to then I have the ability to add Docker perhaps, so I'm going to add features like Docker, some other features that I want. And then I'm going to hit the create button. And as soon as I hit the create button, this is where the magic occurs. Now, my story that I'm going to share with you folks is I was literally at a Starbucks and I had just ordered a latte. So I basically ordered a latte. I came back to my little table and I started to create. I went through these processes. I created I clicked on AWS, I created a VPSA, I created a Docker. It was a 50 terabyte volume or 50 terabyte VPSA. I basically heard my name, Doug, your latte's ready, and I looked down at my screen and I had 50 terabytes of storage. So literally, I was able to create a 50 terabyte VPSA pool, and I was able to do that quicker than Starbucks could create a latte. Pretty darn amazing. So what this does is, and I'm going to use my mouse to explain this a little bit, and so what we're doing here is each VPSA is a totally isolated multi-tenant architecture in a single tenant experience. Each VPSA is got its own drive. So these are solid state drives. It's got its own cores inside my storage nodes for their own RAID controller. So that's isolated. Its own cache layer, its own isolation, its own credentials, its own mirror memory. Everything is completely isolated based on this VPSA. And maybe we're going to use that as database as a service, perhaps. Maybe that's a VPSA number 1 for databases on SSD. Well, right behind that, another customer comes in and says, I'd like to create a performance NAS, and I'm going to put this on hard drives with cache. So now they get their own 10 drives, and they basically have the ability to have their own dedicated engine. And then now I have VPSA 3, which might be object storage for immutable lock storage. So I have the ability to create, maybe in this case, 6 drives. Each of these 3 are very independent, very much isolated, very segmented from anybody else. So if you happen to be in the public cloud, you don't have to worry that company A is going to affect your performance, affect your security, affect anything. And this is the patents. This is the essence of our patents to be able to do this cloud business like nobody on the planet has been able to do for this multi-tenant architecture in a single tenant experience. So that really is what we're doing here. Now, once I created that VPSA, where can I put it? And I can put it in colo, I can put it on-prem, I can put it up in an MSP. And if I put it in a colo, maybe cloud adjacent next to one of the hyperclouds, I now can use their proprietary networking like Direct Connect or Express Route or Partner Interconnect to be able to talk to those particular clouds down there. So now zStorage allows you to operate anywhere you want. And I also can connect these together. Any VPSA on the planet can talk to another VPSA on the planet as long as I have the appropriate IP addressing and credentials and all the other stuff that I need to be able to do. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Howard, and you're going to go through a little bit of ransomware and some backup.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. We have some fantastic technology that if you go back to the 5 pillars of how you use a technology to protect your architecture. One is the isolation. So that's we have the capability with VPSAs to isolate it between other workloads. So in this case, for example, if you wanted to scale out your backup using a VPSA, you could just use your backup software and just basically use that as an end target. So that could be a block device, which you Commvault, Veeam, any type of backup software would use it locally, or it could be object storage. So that can be both local or a remote type of deployment. Now this can grow as you need it. So for example, if you change your backup policies and you double your backup amount of storage that you need to retain over time, you just add more and more VPSA. So it expands and scales out as you need it. Very straight model for this local backup. Now in the other use case, where if you need to do a DR, you can do a couple things. One is that as Doug mentioned, we can connect VPSA. So if you want to do a VPSA to an offsite, we could do a backup or just a snapshot from one VPSA to an offsite VPSA. Now, the other thing is if you're using SRM, so if you have in VMware, if you're using SRM with Site Recovery Manager, you can actually use the move workloads between DR. So you can have a local site and a DR site that allows you to give that capability. Even if your local site goes down, you can actually have a quick failover to your secondary site for workloads and your data. And we do this all with our mirroring and snapshots, and you can do that. It's all triggered through VMware for that.
And remember one thing here, Howard, and customers and partners out there, is your primary storage might be, this is what you said was on-prem, and we're going to basically back this up. So we'll put a small VPSA in your local site, and we'll basically be able to back up to that. I had a question which works on this slide perfectly. I'm looking at on-prem for this type of technology. Can you explain how a POC or proof of concept might work? And so what we would do is we would basically take a small, perhaps a 4 or 11 RU type of rack, depending on the amount of data, and we would go ahead and put it in your data center, and then we could back it up as maybe a performance tier, and maybe this could be more of a capacity piece out here. So we have wonderful proof of concepts. We can basically put it out there for 30 or 60-day trials and be able to do that. Now, our mirroring is turned on basically right at the graphical interface, so we can basically turn that on. You don't even need special software to be able to do that.
Yeah, and Zadara as a primary storage, also it's very straightforward to move. If you have age storage, you can move it onto a new platform such as Zadara. Just do a vMotion. It's very easy to move across platforms, and then you just have this new capabilities that's built into our platform.
Perfect.
Now, some of the capabilities or what you want to look for in a backup, just to protect you from outages and even ransomware, you use this concept called 3-2-1-1-0. So you have 3 different copies of your data, and basically that's going to be 3 backup copies, and 2 of those are going to be different media. So you want to use you use a rotating media in one for block and file and object storage in another. The second one could be also tape. You know, we're trying to steer away from tape because you have that, you know, going back to, there's always going to be a chance that your tape's not going to work when you try to recover data. And the offsite is very important. So now you get the data offsite, so you can recover if your whole site goes down. And then what we want to do is we want to make that immutable. So the immutable case makes the data air gapped from the rest of the system. And what we do is in our object storage, we have a locking, a bucket locking, which allows you to prevent any data being deleted from the system. Now, the final thing what you want to do is basically you want to test your backups. You know, you're backing up your data, and if you never test and verify it, this is the last and most important step to make sure everything is there and you can recover your data.
So Drew, I'm going to bring up question number 2, if you don't mind, the polling question. Let's go ahead and see where everybody stands today with this technology. So let's see, what technology do you currently have that will help you recover from perhaps a ransomware attack? So we have backup software, mirror and replication, snapshots, and I currently don't have a plan for ransomware. And I'll be really interested to see what this is. And I don't want to stack the deck here or slant your decisions, but I think, you know, most people might be looking at their backup software to do this as well. Maybe snapshots. I just taught a class, as you're going through this, I just taught a class on RPO and RTO, recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives, and what technology do you need to recover from the events that you're expecting. And I think that those are maybe another future VMUG that I can bring up as well with my buddy Drew and company here as well. So I think, Drew, that's probably good. Let's go ahead and post it. And so what technology are we using? 64% say backup software. Mirror and replication, about 9%. I'm glad to see snapshots, 24%. That's pretty interesting because we can take snapshots and then create clones, make those read-only. And I don't have a plan, only about 3%. So you guys are really taking the backup and the ransomware certainly serious with only 3% there. So, but go ahead and we can take that quick poll down now for a moment, and let's go ahead and go to the sort of the actual architecture of 32110. And oh, by the way, 32110 is a small town in the state of Florida. I actually had to Google it one day, and everybody's smiling a little bit maybe. It is indeed a zip code, even though Veeam calls it the zip code. So Howard, you can take us through the sort of the pieces, how we stack into the Zadara stack of perhaps performance and capacity and immutability and object storage.
Absolutely. So with Veeam, they have a method or a process where you can actually implement this very easily. And basically, with a Veeam backup server, it allows you to back up your VMs. It allows you to back up your data. And so you would run a Veeam server as a VM in your VMware environment, and that would be used to back up your storage itself. Now, the one of the copies could be on a Zadara, and in this case, you'd probably use block, and the block device would be formatted in one of two things. So it could be just NTFS, for example, or you can use a SMB. So that gives you capability to store it locally, fast, and very easy to recover for any type of outage. So if you're going to have any issue with the recovery of file, it's usually within about a week or two. So you want to keep that stuff local. And then you want to have for long-term archives in case that gets corrupted or you need to have longer archives. You would put that in what we call a sober. The sober tier or cloud tier would actually build out a offsite location. So this would be an object storage capability. And if you have an immutable object lock like in Zadara, that gives you that immutability. So that's going to be the one red in the one in the red bullet there. And then a third copy you'd have offsite. So this would give you a block device offsite, and that would be another capacity tier. So this could all be done through local and remote type of operations.
Very interesting. And I find that it's such an elegant way to think about where your backups are. I've always said that you need the 2 or 3 times rule. If you really want that picture of your grandmother, you better make a backup of it. And if you really want to make sure the backup's there, you ought to put one in your car or one off-site. So right now, if something happened in my house, I would lose not only my computer, but also my backup. So that's so important to basically get it off-site. And then the real use case of this, Howard, I know you were the architect of this, but we actually put 3211 into usage at University of Denver.
Yeah, well, at the University of Denver, they have 2 sites. Actually, they have a Hyper-V and VMware. So one's going to be on campus there, and then they extended their campus out into a data center. So it's two different data centers, and they have a primary copies that's at both locations. And then what we do is we run a Veeam backup onto Zadara, and that's in our 6TB site in Denver 1. And then we also have in Denver 1 in another object storage. It actually gives an object storage. So we're actually having 2 copies, different medias. And then finally, what we do is we take those archives and then we move that offsite again. So this is our snapshot. This was before having the, with 9.5, Veeam 9.5, this is before the immutability. So we put this in process, and we recognize that immutability capability is very important, even before it was supported by Veeam. So we added this last leg, the mirror for Denver, to give them that extra case, extra redundancy there.
Perfect. Thank you, Howard, for that.
Mm-hmm.
So use case number 4 is really about DR, and somebody in the poll said that mirroring and replication was about 10% of the way you're going to protect from this. If you have your primary storage on the left, and we basically migrate your storage perhaps to a VPSA, maybe under proof of concept, maybe you want to test this out. So we use VPSA as production for a while to be able to do that. Now what we do is we click the button and we say, I'd like to mirror that to a DR or an offsite facility. Maybe I'm on-prem and I want to go to the cloud, or maybe I'm in the cloud and I want to go to another cloud or whatever, and I want to be able to do that. So I want to be able to mirror that data over to the DR site for safekeeping. And the reason I put in SQL and NFS and CIFS up there was primarily the ability to show we can do this by application, we can do this by use case, we can do this however we want to do it, based on the comfort level that you folks have as well. Again, 100% OpEx, refresh from CapEx to OpEx perhaps. Maybe we want to get rid of the capital expenses. We can span local and offsite, no long-term commitments, and we can utilize the hardware there. I'm going to bring up the last polling question, Drew, if you want to. And basically, we're going to talk about, do you currently procure your solutions from one of the following? So do we use are you direct? Are you large enough to do direct, perhaps with a manufacturer, a managed service, or a reseller partner? Maybe you go through distribution, or maybe you're in the hyper cloud like AWS or Azure, and you're basically choosing those solutions there. So we'll go ahead and just wait a minute for that to fill in. And I know that you folks are very attentive to this right now, so you're right on the mouse, I'm sure. And so I think that's pretty much settled out. So let's go ahead and post that. So basically what we're seeing here is 63% go through a managed service or a reseller partner, 6% through distribution, 23% direct to a manufacturer, and then about 9%. And I'm sure that AWS and Azure probably lines up with the people that are actually using the various technologies as well. So that's great. Now, the other question, and I kind of put this in, even though it's not a backup topic, but a lot of you folks are out there, maybe the cloud is so enticing, it's so interesting, but how do I basically hydrate to the cloud? And at Zadara here, we've got an interesting sort of a way of doing what I call the lily pad or the leapfrog approach, is I'm gonna basically put the VPSA in your data center on-prem as a service, and I'm gonna basically move the data over to the VPSA. And I'm gonna basically do that, and I'm gonna basically use the VPSA as production. Maybe it's just one application, maybe it's just SQL or NFS or whatever I want to do there. And then I'm gonna go ahead and mirror over to those applications one at a time over to the cloud. So I'm gonna mirror that over to the cloud. and I'm going to start to test it over here at the cloud. And I say, well, that worked pretty good. Now what do I do? Well, that worked pretty good, and so forth. So I start to migrate little by little, leapfrogging over into the cloud and being able to do this. I then break the mirror on the applications that are successfully rendered in the cloud, and I basically consider that a win, and that a win, and that a win. And then what I do, because you don't own the on-prem unit, we're basically going to ship that unit back to Zadara, and your hydration is complete. So basically, this is a way we've done this so many times to be able to kind of pretty much hydrate the cloud and work from there. So back to you, Howard. I got a question. It says, for performance tiers, do you recommend block or file for the performance tiers when you're doing the 32110?
Sometimes you want to use both, or one or the other. With the performance tier, you usually use block for quick access, and you use REFS for as the OS. But in some cases, you want to use SMB. So SMB gives you the case of allowing to expand your volumes very easily. So you just expand your volume size, and it grows if you need to increase your pool for the backup. And it also gives you a little bit better security, because now you're running in as a user, protected user mode instead of as a block device, which can sometimes be deleted if your admin rights get compromised.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So I've got in here to help you folks out a little bit, and I've kind of boiled this presentation into some of the things that you're asking yourself, I'm sure, when you have these meetings amongst yourselves. 6 questions to ask about a backup, perhaps a partner and things like this that you might not know about. Now, we work a lot with Veeam, of course, as you would imagine. A lot of these conversations have stemmed from our Veeam relationship. But the partner, you're asking the partner, are you validated for immutability object storage, perhaps with Veeam or something like that? Do you have this immutability? If you want to set up for ransomware, if you want to protect, you've got to have this immutability characteristics in your storage device. Is your storage truly single tenant experience? I talked about creating VPSAs and isolating those. So if you're in the public cloud, it really just lends to a really interesting conversation with your internal members that says, I know my storage is in a public cloud, but it's completely isolated at the core, at the storage node, at the disk, at the cache. All the levels are completely isolated. Will your storage deliver multi-tier with air gaps? So the multi-tier piece, the object going up to the NAS and perhaps the hard drives, and then going up to the high-performance SSD. We want to be able to recover quickly, and a lot of our customers are putting the performance tier on SSDs, as Howard was talking about. Can I change my technology as my needs change? Literally, you can now create, if I was to ship you a whole bunch of hard drives, HDDs, and you said, Doug, I've realized that I need a lot more SSDs. Can you ship me more SSDs? And the answer is absolutely. Pull out the hard drives, I'll ship you the SSDs. You don't pay for them until you start to use them. So that is the changing out of the migration of this technology. Can you deliver the same experience in multiple locations? We talked about that. And what if I need to scale back? What if I need to go back in time and I want to basically go from perhaps 500 terabytes to 300 because something changed? A good example of that is the media and entertainment business, the ability to create a movie that might be hundreds of terabytes to create the movie, but I only need a few terabytes to basically maintain that movie. What we discussed so far today is a single simplified backup and recovery solutions, the tiers to accommodate this, one of the few partners out there that can do the tiering, the ability to change technology based on the business demands, OpEx storage that matches the Veeam subscription licensing. So that's really key. When you get to the software, you don't have to basically play a game of science here. Rapid on-prem recovery that Howard went through, end-to-end strategy for cloud solution providers and enterprises, and then this 24/7 piece that we basically are so proud of to be able to do that. I have another question here. Are there alternative backup methods to get an air gap without using immutable object storage? So Howard, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, there's many ways to do it. One is in our technology, we discussed that you can do a snapshot or a mirror to another site. But what we didn't discuss was that we can actually take those controllers offline, so that gives you an air gap. So usually, going back to the case with Denver University, what we did is during the snapshot process, we turn on the controllers and then we shut them down completely after that. So the data is still there, it's just you can't access it. So it just gives you a complete air gap at that point at a controller level.
Interesting you say that. Harvard University, not for a backup need or a ransomware need, but Harvard University actually turns off their controllers on the weekend when all the students are basically are at home. Hopefully they're not working on their thesis during the weekends in some cases, or they're not working on some of the stuff. And then they go ahead and they turn off the hybrid, they turn the controllers back on again when they get back to it.
Yeah. And that's our scale down architecture. So you can scale that down, like you can scale down on the amount of storage.
Of course, perfect. So we've got a couple of success stories here. Do you want to take us through Zebra a little bit, Howard?
Yeah, Zebra uses our object storage, and they're starting to go, and you'll find more and more companies are starting to develop for object storage instead of using like a typical block or file type of infrastructure. And so with object storage, that gives you plenty of growth and pretty much an infinite amount of storage. You just add drives and it scales out naturally. And with the immutability capability, they do a couple things. One, they can protect the data over long terms. So if they have any legal holds on the data, they can hold the data for, on a patient for years. So they can set a bucket for or a container on a child, and then they basically can lock it for 18 years. That'll give a complete lockdown of the data. So that's sort of an application of immutability that's done at the object storage.
Perfect, like that. I've got some questions here before I go to the next use case. I have one question that says, how does the VPSA set up to appear local? This is a cloud storage. And the answer is it can be cloud, but I can move this directly to your edge into your data center, basically, and basically the ability to have near zero latency by putting it in your data center. But it's a cloud solution. It offers the full cloud entree of products and services, but it's in your data center. If you happen to be local to one of the actual public clouds out there, then you basically can VPN in, or you can do those pieces there. So it's very, very easy. But it really is a design element to be able to do some of that as we need to. I have another question here. Howard, do you want to spend more time on that, or are you okay?
Just one addition to that is that when you add a multi cloud type of architecture, when you're integrating AWS, Google, or Azure into your data center, you're setting up a private network. So you don't need a VPN. It's a private VLAN that's associated with your cloud account and with Zadara. So it's just going to be a layer 3 type of connection.
So another question was, so 3 copies of the backups for ransomware, and you can get away with 2. You can have the local copy, you can have the remote copy, and you can have the immutability copy. So you can have basically, or you can have your primary, I should say, primary and then remote. We always put in the 3rd copy generally for fast recoveries and things like that, but you really can go with 2 copies, one being immutable and one being basically off-site to be able to do that. But we generally show the 3 copies. And again, I want to be able to talk to price performance. I want to be able to put the right technology at the right time to be able to give you the price point that you're really looking for. So, all right, let's go on. Let's go on to Rakuten. They're basically using our object storage. So I show this one primarily to show the scale of what our object storage is. This is, petabytes of storage that are basically running on this particular module here. A single solution for block, file, and object is what they loved, but a lot of it is object here. The ability to have this critical back office, this instant message and voicemail, all the various pieces here as well. Now, this is stood up in their data center for the most part. So this is the local solution where they're, remember, edge, they're really close to the generation of the data. They want to basically put this really close to where their need is and then you can read the quote right here as well.
You know, an interesting thing with Rakuten is it's dual city, so it's an active data centers across Tokyo and Osaka. So it's 300 miles apart, and you have users in different cities with active storage. So even if the one of the data centers goes down, they'll still have a high availability type of operation.
And isn't that what it's all about, is to continue to operate when things happen out of your control, whether it be a site failure, whether it be a hurricane down in Florida, I have to think about that all the time, whether it be an earthquake, whether it be just human error, whether it be some threat that's coming in. We want to be able to put an architecture together for you that allows you to do that with our partnerships with all these other companies as well. One of my buddies, Nolan, up in Salt Lake City in Utah, Ancestry, they ingest a whole lot of data coming in from microfilms and things like that. I bet you nobody's heard the word microfilm in a long time, but that's where a lot of the data is currently housed today. So absolutely, he scans it in a SIF format or Microsoft, and then basically we present it to the Amazon cloud and he spits it out as an NFS file. So if you have to deal with both Microsoft and Linux engines, we basically have that game in town that we can basically take care of as well. And so even as we were scaling, we've been able to reduce expenses. How did he do that? Because he went from smaller SSD drives, which are less dense, to larger SSD drives, which are more dense. So we were actually able to bring his costs down to be able to do that. I've got another question here. They're asking if we cover Canada. Welcome from our friends above up in north. The Great North. So yes, we do cover Canada. We're installed in Toronto. We're installed in Montreal, and we can also install, of course, in your data center. That's really the wonder of this, is I don't have to worry about where people are today. If you have a data center or you have a co-location facility that you use, we can basically put this anywhere the point of need is. We call that edge technology that we can basically move to. So we're very, very easy to do that. Perfect. Thank you for those questions, by the way. Great questions. So what I wanted to do is I'm going to turn this over to Drew in just a second. So I know he's got some housekeeping to do. So stick tight here. He's always got some really cool stuff at the end of these sessions. So don't run away on me. Let's get started. Let's learn more about the streamlining your backup by visiting our site. You can basically go in and register for a free trial. You'll be able to experience the power and convenience of Zadara. So basically, we want to partner with you folks. You've spent an hour with me today or a little bit less, and we basically want to help you out. That's really what it's all about, is really looking at your challenges or your problems or whatever is keeping you awake at night and being able to, you bring our partnerships in. We know the cloud probably better than most people. We know storage extremely better, well, and so we can basically help you out here. So with that, Drew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Doug and Howard, for taking the time to speak with us today. As a reminder to our audience, you will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand link from today's webcast. To find out more about the VMUG Webcast program, visit vmug.com and check out the education page. Please make sure to complete the short online evaluation that will pop up as you exit the webcast, and let us know how today's session went. We're almost done with all of the webcasts for 2020. Can you believe this year's over? So be sure to catch our last one tomorrow. And with that, from all of us here at VMUG, I got to thank Doug and Howard again, and thank you to the audience. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Howard.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you so much for everybody joining me, and happy holidays, of course, and make it a great new year.
Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.